Hey, this is Gary. This is my Jeep. It's a 2014 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Rubicon. The Rubicon is the best off-roading vehicle you can buy until you start getting into six figures. That's because it has a solid front and rear axle and front and rear locking differentials, disconnecting sway bar, and of course, four-wheel drive, high and low. So, you can buy a 4Runner or a Land Cruiser, but honestly, this is a better off-roading vehicle. Those vehicles are better on-road. They have better road manners because they don't have that solid front axle. So I want to go over this thing. The name of my Jeep is Sherpa, and you can see on the hood, I have it written in Tibetan. Actually, literally says Sharpa, since Sherpa is a Nepali word, and I'm doing Tibetan because Tibetan was my background in grad school. So. Sherpa kind of implies a trusty guide, a load-bearing servant of sorts, and that's kind of what this thing has been, and that's because this is an overland build. And the purpose of this vehicle, as we've built it, because we've put a lot of stuff on this, is to take us long distances, allow us to camp and live off our supplies, and generally, it's not about rock crawling, which a lot of Jeeps you'll see, the big lifted Jeeps with, giant tires. That's a rock crawling build, and that's not what we're doing here. So I'm going to go over what we did on this vehicle, and most of this is all of the upgrades are done by me and a friend of mine, Chris, who's the mastermind behind how to do this kind of work. Although I did all the research. So let me start at the front of the Jeep, and I'll kind of go around, and we'll talk about what I have. So first thing you see when you look at this Wrangler is the large steel bumper, full length ARB Deluxe Bull Bar bumper, and it has advantages for things like animal strikes because it protects the radiator from being damaged, which keeps your vehicle going. But you need a steel bumper if you're going to have a winch. You can't put a giant winch on a plastic bumper, and believe it or not, all the Jeeps come with plastic bumpers, which is kind of sad. Saves weight and all that, but you can't do much with that. So I've got a Warn VR10S winch, which is a beefy winch. It's the top of the line of the Warn consumer market, so it's not the best that money can buy, but it does the job, or it should. And honestly, with a Rubicon, I haven't had it over a winter yet, but so far I haven't had any trouble at all needing a winch. Unlike my last vehicle, my Cherokee, which needed to be pulled out with this thing a number of times in a short period. So attached to the bumper are the IPF lights. They're halogen lights, and I like the look of the halogen. These are tried and true, best of breed lights. I would probably do LED lights next time because they take less power, and power becomes the big issue once you start adding this stuff. And this was the first modification, so if I had known about my power limitations and issues, I probably would have gone LED lights. The fog lights are LED lights. These are some great, these are truck lights. These are great LED lights. The stock headlights are terrible and will get replaced as soon as possible because honestly I'm relying on the fog lights to see. That's how bad it is at night. I have these fancy hood latches, who I forget they're from because they came with the vehicle when I bought it used. The Wranglers have this weird hood flutter problem where the wind comes up underneath the engine and the hood flutters up and down and freaks you out because it is possible that if the latches fail, the hood will fly up, hit the window, and make your life terrible. So that, and this has struts holding up the hood when you open it. That was two things that were here when I bought the vehicle. Coming around here, the marketing department has put a nice trail rated badge, and I've joined this overland bound overlanding group to get more into overlanding. So those are kind of cool badges. So these are plastic inserts. My mother's like, "What are those for?" And I'm like, "Well, Mom, sometimes when you open the door and it's really windy, the little strap on the door pops off, the cloth strap, and the door will fly forward and the mirror will smash into your cowl." These are cowl covers for that eventuality. And if you think I'm being kind of finicky about that, I've already got a dent on this one, so I just have two of those now to kind of one to hide the dent and one for symmetry. Tire wise, let me tell you about tires. If you do all the research, best tires you can buy are the BF Goodrich all-terrain TA KO2s. These KO2s are the best tires, and if you're not buying them, you're pretty much doing it because you don't have the money for them. They're amazing tires. They're awesome on the road and they're awesome off-road, and you can air them down, and they've got triple ply sidewalls, and they can go off-road aired down all day long, and never a problem, and people report very few issues with these. They're 33s. If you actually measure them, they're 32, but that's pretty common with tires. I had to measure them for adjusting the OBD2 settings because that's one of those things. Going around the vehicle, let's go around the other side. This is a Rotopax water container. I spent a couple days painting this, and I did a plastic adhere treatment and a bunch of base coat and a bunch of clear coats on this using color matched paint, and honestly it's held up really well. I was convinced it wasn't going to hold up, but it's actually held up. Now every place on the back where it touches metal the paint's gone. It's just gone. It's just not, it was never going to hold up, so that's fine, but it does not seem to be flaking after our 7,000 mile road trip, so I'm impressed with that. So let's go around the back. On the back, we also have an aftermarket bumper, and this is an AEV aftermarket bumper, and it has a water reservoir, and it has 2 tanks, one on each side, and they hold about 3 gallons of water, 2.5, 3 gallons, and they're connected in the middle by a hose. And the problem is you can't really drain it, so it's not really, it's technically potable when you get it, but in reality it's probably going to be more water for the engine if you need it, for the radiator, but it's there if you need it. It also has a fuel tank, which they also claim more than it will actually hold. They claim 10 gallons, but it holds 6.5. Actually has gas in there now that we didn't use from the trip, and you just use a shaker siphon and you get the gas out, and that's a pretty useful thing, because you know, if you're out there, you can run out of gas. If you're in a really thick terrain and you're cutting your way through, you could do 1 mile per gallon. It could be that bad, and you could get stuck. On the back we have another IPF halogen light. Again, probably would have gone LED if I had thought about it. And let's see, I've got, because this stuff is so heavy, I've got aftermarket steel hinges on here, and on the back here is where I have my where a rack would go, the mean mother rack for my MaxTrax boards, which to get me out of trouble. I take that off because this is my daily driver, so probably should have left it on for the video. So let's look in the back. The back is the coolest part. So in the back, first of all, we've got our map of where we went on this trip. I think it was 22 states. I've got my ham radio call sign and the frequency I monitor when I'm on the road, and I have used that in Colorado, I believe, this trip, and talked to people about a problem up ahead. So that was kind of cool. And you can see from my sticker, it says I've got a fire extinguisher and a first aid kit. So I am advertising that you can steal these things, but they're not that expensive. And there's my, just pull that right off from the Velcro. Fire extinguisher. First aid kit includes a trauma kit, including like Israeli bandages, stuff like that. We've got kind of a bush knife for clearing brush, which honestly is too nice to use. Don't tell my knife maker that, because he thinks it should get a lot of use, but it's just too pretty. And then in the back here we have an ARB Roller Drawer, and on the right side we usually have my refrigerator, and then on the left we have a couple boxes, which includes a stove and a galley, essentially. You open this up, roller drawer, it locks in place, and we got a toolkit, we've got a spare parts bag, and we've got a recovery bag. I've just recently rejiggered this based on how often I use each. I got an air compressor and a get home bag in case we do break down and we need to walk a long way. It's got water and a little bit of food and emergency supplies, enough to basically spend the night if you had to. And then I've just noticed zip ties, duct tape, and paracord things that I've just seemed to be always using. I just have left out at this point. So there's that. It closes like that. It's got two little side compartments with more stuff like jumper cables. A lot of times you end up bringing things for other people, like the jumper cables, because I've got a jump kit under the seat. So also on the top here, I've got a high lift jack. This is to get you out of some tricky situations. This is a terrible location for this jack. This is really bad because when you're stuck, you're stressed out. It's probably very hot, and down here you have a refrigerator and two big cases that you now have to either remove or work around to get the stupid jack out. So it's not the best place. It should really be outside, and that's probably a future project. So let's look in the inside here. Look in the back. There's an aftermarket Jeep filler door. I don't know why he bought that. That was the third thing I guess this guy, previous owner, bought. So in the back here, you can see we've got a USB cable. That's for my son's iPad. In the back we have an inverter, a 1000-watt inverter, and so you can plug any 110 household appliance in there. For the most part, it charges video game systems for my son. And then on the other side, which you probably can't see, there are a couple cigarette lighter plugs. One of them does the refrigerator, and it has stayed there without any problems the whole trip, including a lot of off-roading. And the second one is for this USB cable and my boy. Makes him very happy. I think it's a 2.4 amp, so it gives him a fast charge. And let's look at the front. In the front, we have this A-pillar switch pod that has switches for the off-road lights in the front, the rear lights, the air compressor, which doesn't exist yet, and the bottom one, if my locker is bad in the back, which we haven't diagnosed yet, will probably be the air compressor or rear locker, rear locker for the ARB rear locker. So there's that. And then up top, I have a Kenwood ham radio. It's a dual band, so it actually can monitor two bands at once. And the advantage there is you could have one band you're monitoring that's a base camp, or it could be, if you're in a convoy of vehicles, it could be the leaders, the front and back. You monitor their frequency while also monitoring and talking on a base frequency for everybody. So it's a little fancy, but honestly, it's just not that much more money for a nicer one. Now inside the glove compartment is a CB radio. You can kind of see that in there. That honestly hasn't been used since I installed it, because everybody I talk to is talking on the ham. But I can always pull out the headset, the handset, and use that if I find myself in a group using CB. Now a lot of people are switching to GMRS and other FRS, other types of frequencies, but generally the Jeep clubs all require a CB radio. And in the front you can see I've got my ham radio antenna there, and that works great up front there. And then in the back I've got my CB antenna, which honestly I've broken multiple times and should probably leave off unless I know I'm going to go someplace where there are people talking on the CB. So there you have it. Just give you one more view of this thing. I love this thing. I drive it every day. It's a lifestyle choice. It's not an easy vehicle to live with. It's not comfortable. It's not fast. It's not economical. It is super cool, but it also is a bit hated by some people. I have one bad scratch on this thing, and it happened in a city because I'm pretty sure somebody didn't like me. So, didn't like my California plates, or didn't like I had a Jeep. I haven't decided. Haven't figured it out. Anyway, there we are. Thanks a lot. Thanks for looking at Sherpa.